Hi everyone, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to make this presentation. Together with the African Invest team, we try to put together a few elements just to show you what are the trends in Africa and where we're going from here, and what are the important components. At least what we feel is important for the future of the VC and innovation ecosystem in Africa. So probably a lot of you have seen these numbers, but this is basically the evolution of the investment in startups in Africa over the past 8 years. And you see that there has been a strong growth over the past 7 years, quite unseen, specific to Africa, because this has also continued in 2022, which is quite interesting, Behind these figures, I think there are a lot of information that you need probably to integrate that are important in taking decisions when you're either an investor or an entrepreneur. And the key question, I think, that everybody is asking themselves today is this sustainable at the African level, but also at the global level, knowing that a few important changes are happening today. So let me try this that way. Okay. So first, this is the picture in terms of the same picture by funding stage, and this is by value. As you can see, there's a few differences. A lot of the money that has been added up in the past 2 years have been on late stage, which is quite important. As the ecosystem is maturing, we're not investing anymore only on pre-seed, seed stage companies, but also on Series A, Series B. And now a lot of the very big rounds are rounds of 30, 40, 50 million and more are into Series B, Series C, what we call late stage. The important reason for this is that basically as we grow this ecosystem, the money that gets invested has to come back. We need exit. I think that the very important step basically in the next 2 to 3 years to sustain the growth is that those very same investors that have been investing in startups expect some returns, and so we only can sustain the growth if we start selling some of these companies, providing money back, and those same investors will probably be reinvesting into new funds, therefore into new companies, or directly into new companies if these are angel investors. That's one important element. The other good news is that at the scale of global VC and innovation, this is still extremely small. I mean, when you consider a $5 billion volume of investment or amount of investment last year, at the scale of a city in the US, it represents the city of Philadelphia. It's still a very small ecosystem. I think there's still a lot of space to grow. I think the good news is that this is only a beginning. So there's still a lot of margin for growth, and I think the structuring of the ecosystem should come through institutional investors like Smart Capital, like other fund of funds that needs to be structured in other regions, and that should work together on structuring this ecosystem into a much more developed ecosystem. This has happened in a country like China, where the government has been launching several fund of funds at the central level, but also at the province level. The same should happen here. We need, and I know that there are a lot of groups that are involved into preparing new laws around startup acts. I think the corollary to those laws should actually be we need money to finance startups, and we need money basically to structure this ecosystem from the funding side. Now let's look at maybe another way to look at this picture. Coming, yes. So regionally, I think this is quite well, if you look at these numbers, with the exception probably of Central Africa, this is well distributed among the different regions in Africa. Both North, West, Central, and Southern Africa have basically got their own shares of the investment that's been getting to the African continent in the past year. This being said, about 70% of this goes to the big four, being basically Nigeria, South Africa, Egypt, and Kenya. So there's still a very big concentration over this big market, which is normal. Huh? This is the way it is in most markets. If you look at Europe, it's still the same. London, Paris, Berlin, and Amsterdam are taking the lion's share of what get invested. And so given that we're not into one of these 4 countries, I know that there's a few friends from Egypt, but a lot of the people here have been working in and evolving in Tunisia, in Morocco, in Algeria, and in some of these smaller markets. I think they're important element that needs to be kept in mind when you're an investor. And my second part, I'll try to focus on what we think are important elements for founders on how they pitch and grow their companies. Another important element here is that you can see that basically there's a lot of funding that goes to multi-region companies. And this is very important. From the Series A, Series B, VCs look essentially at companies that do not depend on one single country, unless you're into a very deep market and quite a large country. Most of the companies that we look at, for instance, as Series A, Series B investors, would probably be companies that have already reached a size where they're into 3, 4, 5 different markets. One of the important reasons for us is that it diversifies the risk, and also it diversifies also the risk from a devaluation standpoint on all of these markets. And so, and as you can see, that 7% in volume translates into 35% in value. So a third of the money that gets invested are in countries that are, or in companies that are in multiple countries. And this is also important in a country like Tunisia or like Morocco, where the central bank have actually put in place very strict rules on FX. I think it's important to understand that these companies do not know borders. At least if you are to grow a successful company, it has to go beyond the border of your own country. I'll come back to this. This is a very important point. In terms of evolution, I think these are the evolution of the key key countries. As you can see, you still have the top 4, but the 2 elements I think that you can take away from this is that below this, I think you have very little amount invested into the other countries. They've been I put the amount here, but they've been sorted by number of deals. But the interesting part is that as number 5, you have the US. So what does that mean? That means that basically a lot of these companies are actually incorporated in the US. Even if they have operations in Africa, the top companies are US and UK-based team. And this is not only a trend. As soon as a company becomes profitable, you need to reassure the big investors, and you need to go to jurisdictions where people understand the laws. If you are to create a company in a country like, let's say, China or Zimbabwe or Czech Republic, these are laws that people do not understand. You need to come back to basically jurisdictions where investors are confident about laws being applied and implemented in terms of security. And so the US is definitely one of the big jurisdictions. Same with the UK, they're more, and there are more and more compliance elements around incorporating companies into exotic jurisdiction. For the founders that are here, try to walk away from this. At least these are, as soon as you get to important and serious and professional institutional investors, they will be judging from also the compliance of the company towards the law that they have to comply with. Last elements on this sector and market review is fintech in Africa has been taking the lion's shares of the investment. It's also the same. It's still number 1, or it's been number 1 in the past year globally. I think it's been attracting about 20% of the investment. But it's much more in Africa. And if you take from an amount standpoint, it's actually more than this. It's about 41 or 42%. The element is. The explanation for this is Africa is still a very cash-driven economy, and the formal financial sector still doesn't penetrate well enough population. We still have a lot of improvement in terms of financial inclusion in the financial sector. Fintech is playing a role there, and fintech also plays a role from an infrastructure standpoint for other companies to build on the top of it. It's not possible for a company to scale if they don't have the right payment gateway that is to connect with so that people can pay online. So these are important elements. The same thing in terms of data. I think the important element that to score people and to be able to provide them beyond payment credit so that they can buy and pay over time, I think relies on fintech to basically gather those data and be able to make sense out of it from a credit standpoint. If you're not in fintech, you're probably in one of those categories, and then you don't have it. You need to be able to make sense of the scale of the market you're in. Obviously, payment is a very scalable business, a scalable market, sorry. You can be in a small market and that space being deep enough to be able to build a multi-$100 million companies like we've seen for Wave, for instance, in Senegal. But if you're not there, then I think the obvious way or strategy for a company should be to actually go outside of your market. I think it's important that you get to a picture that is a multi-country market to get there. Whether you're in e-commerce, in health tech, in supply chain, mobility, and others, these are the important elements to keep in mind in terms of going to fundraise beyond a certain point. So these are the elements that I wanted to share with you. I know that I have more time, and so I've prepared a few slides. I've actually gathered some information from the team at Africa Invest just to get some advices for the founders that are here. Apologies for the ones that are not founders, on terms of how to improve basically the pitches. We received last year about 1,300 pitch decks, and so we read all of them. We take calls with about a third of them, and I think we have some lessons learned from this for founders that I think are quite important. The first thing is that we see too many founders not having one business but several businesses. And this is and I've been discussing with some people yesterday, the founders that I had the same approach to say, I have a few ideas, select one. Select one and be simple and clear about the one that you select. This is key. You cannot pitch a VC saying, I'm doing three things at the same time. They just want you to do one thing. I know that it's a risk, and if you're doing, that's great. Don't talk about it. Focus. I think at least provide an image of somebody who focuses and get committed on one idea that has the most potential. Getting there. Then this is a quite important point. Often we have companies that come with competition, which is good. I think competition is actually something that is important because it shows that there is actually a market. Let me come back. But you need to clearly show what your USPs are. USP are, where is it? Should come back. Yes, your unique selling points are. It is. We don't see it. In most presentations, we have to dig ourselves to find what differentiates a company from basically its competition. And obviously, it's not easy to identify your own USPs, but you're the only one that can do it. It's very important to do it in your own place. And I think there's a very good book that talks about this called 0 to 1. I think you should read it if you haven't read it. It's almost a Bible for entrepreneurs. And we look for companies that have very strong USPs. That are unique in terms of what they do. It can be a product, it can be a market, it can be a positioning, it can be a model. And this is at the heart of basically the way the company has to innovate. Let me wait. It's coming. Maybe if Komai can help me with the slides up there. And yes. So I've been talking about this. I'm putting back it here just to show to what extent this is important. If you are in small markets, there's a chance that most of the founders here are in small markets. You need to think global or Pan-African or regional. You cannot think just by your market. If you come with a Tunisian, basically, company with a Tunisian market, I'm sorry to say that you have a very small market. It's 10 million. It's as if basically Facebook would say, you know what, we'll stop at a very small. Of course, they started with Harvard as a market, with potentially global market as an end market. And I think you need to show this. You need to show that basically your model is not only relevant to your specific market, but to a larger market. It doesn't have to be Tunisia, Morocco, or Tunisia, Egypt, or whatever. Or no, it's you have to define what is relevant to your own company here. Governance. I know that this is a point that doesn't come back a lot, but we see too many founders being alone. No co-founders, no board, no advisors. It's extremely important to show that basically there are people that are supporting your ideas and that are putting in place the right governance structure around you. As investors, it would be much more comfortable for us and securing to see that you know how to interact within a certain governance structure. And we assess this. It's an important element. We often forget about how important this is, but this is also stabilizes the way the company goes. It can actually absorb some of the conflict that end up having two co-founders splitting up for a stupid debate. And so it's extremely important to put the right governance structure. I know that the slide have gone, that's fine. Then we receive decks, of course, from everywhere, everyone. But often we see that the founders have not made the minimum amount of research to understand who they're talking to. There's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of database like this one that I just put here that shows you what VCs are about. And there are VCs from everywhere investing in Africa, by the way, from the US, from UK, from Europe, from Africa itself. So do your research. I mean, this is a very simple thing to try to understand what the VCs that you have in front of you are actually doing and whether it corresponds to what you're looking for. Also, try to get and select who your investor should be. Then I think I have a last point, if I get there. Yes, no. Yes, no. Here. Storytelling. Yeah, it's not only about providing a deck and a presentation. You really need to basically make us a bit dream about your project and where it can go. I mean, this is quite an important element. The storytelling part in the presentation is often an element that is overlooked. And I think try to get to basically say something that goes beyond just a simple presentation of the product and some key element that we see in most decks. Well, that's what I want to say. I want to thank my team for helping me on this, and thank you very much, everyone, for listening to me.
Khaled, can you stay here? Q&A, of course. Thank you. So, thank you, Khaled Ben Jilani. Do you have any questions in the room? Can take a couple of questions. No questions? It was perfect. There's a question. Yeah, see. I know you're perfect, Khaled Ben Jilani. Yes.
Thank you, Asim. Thank you, Khaled. I wanted to get your advice on how you think investors from abroad can come into the Tunisian market and work along with other VCs to help build the ecosystem.
Can you just introduce yourself?
So my name is Hassam, and I'm a senior associate at Silicon Badia, a global VC that has just extended a regional fund that would cover Tunisia and Morocco.
Okay, thank you. Listen, I mean, that's an important question. I can tell you what we do in some markets, and often when we don't know a specific market, we try to work with existing investors, whether institutional or individual. That doesn't matter. Ideally institutional, but that doesn't have to. And so build links and ties with other investors, either by co-investing. I think that's the ideal scenario, but it could be also by just collaborating and exchanging information on the market. I think when you invest into a market that you don't know, the first question that you ask yourself is who you're investing with actually. You don't know the people, you don't know them by reputation, you have no clue or very little ones about the intrinsic quality of the people investing with, the level of integrity. And I think that's what you want to get from this. But also the do's and don'ts into a specific market that you don't want to learn at the expense of your own investment. And so that gap should actually come ideally by working with others or by recruiting. If you reach a certain size of portfolio, you own a team here. But there's a lot of here in the room support organizations that know very well the ecosystem, that been working with entrepreneurs. And I think these could be also very good partners for a fund like yours and for others who are trying to have a better feel of what is happening in Tunisia and Morocco and Algeria.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Go ahead. So we don't have like lots of time. So there was a question. There is no man, and there was someone who just raised his hand here. I think, right? No. Okay. No, but there is someone else who asked for a question, right? No. Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I'm in with Iba from Cross Boundary. So what we do in Tunisia now as Cross Boundary is we're supporting a portfolio of companies and startups. Some of them are present here. And we had talks with regional funds, international ones, VC funds, and one of the first comments that we have is that they need to see local traction in the local market. And we tried to explain them that for Tunisia could be something complicated because it's a small market, as you said, and first thing maybe that startups here think about is going abroad. And it's, for some VC funds, it's kind of the opposite way, that they need to see traction before investing in a company to go abroad, as you said, for Series A. So how do you, as for example, Africa Invest, deal with the situation, or as what you have seen through the continent? Thank you.
No, that's listen. It's a chicken in the egg. You have to start somewhere, obviously, and often we ask you first to focus and show that you succeed in your own market. And I think you have to be smart about this. There's no golden rules about the way to follow. I think one good example is Go My Code, which basically has had very important traction on the local market, and in parallel, in an extremely lean way, without defocusing from the traction that they've built on the local market in Tunisia, where they've built a very strong brand, which have taken time basically to be known. I think they raised. In the second round, they raised probably less than $400,000 in hard currency, so that they could use basically for international expansion. With that money, they fully utilized that money for international expansion rather than for local expansion, and open in 7 new countries with a very small amount of money. So I'm not saying this is the example to follow, but I think you need to smartly use your money, be very lean about and cost conscious on this, while creating growth into the market where you have the most traction. That would be probably the right approach. But if you are a local company into one of these small markets, you need to have traction while having some kind of element of growth into other markets. I think that's an important element to show.
We're gonna have the mic here.
Thanks, Khaled. Naamen. So, just a question. Do you see a trend in deep tech in Africa? I'm not speaking about AI, which is obvious, but deep tech coming from the scientific research, biotechnology, and things like that. Or is it still in anecdote phase?
So to answer the question straight, yes, of course. First, it's a very important trend. We cannot only rely on, sorry to use the word, copycats. So basically reproducing, even if today there's a real trend in the VC space on what is being called horizontal growth. I mean, vertical would be pure innovation. Horizontal will be reproducing what's been working somewhere else. And so that horizontal growth is probably 80 to 90% of what we see currently on the continent in terms of the startups that are being set up. There's still very little pure innovation, specifically in deep tech. But I think if we really want to develop the sector beyond a certain point, it has to be on deep tech. At some point, we need to actually create. Sorry, let me just take that back a bit. Deep tech and African innovation. We need to create models that are needed given the gaps that exist in the market, and those models have to be labeled as what. One of them is of course M-Pesa as mobile money, but I think it's been reused too much. We need more of that. On the deep tech side, in particular, I think in terms of distribution, we've seen most of the interesting deep tech projects in South Africa, in North Africa, for the moment. But now we see some very interesting projects coming in Kenya, in Nigeria too, of people from the diaspora that's been going to Stanford, MIT, coming up with very interesting deep tech innovation and bringing up also innovative business model on the ground. Some in the health sector, for instance, that have been interesting. And I think this could actually be one of the factors that basically continue and sustain the growth that we've seen in the market in terms of investing into very interesting companies, also providing important multiple potential potential growth of multiples for investors. I think that's also important. Deep tech is probably one of the opportunities when and pure innovation where we see those very important multiples that can actually attract more investors to come onto the continent.
Thank you. There's last question there. No, 2, 3. We're running out of time, so please ask. Go ahead.
Hello.
C'est bon.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Khaled, for the presentation. Nabil Chadwara from United Gulf Financial Services. Just a quick question, which is I think is important, given the scalability importance for any success of any projects. Going from one market, being small or to a larger regional market or international market, it has some obstacles. Some of the obstacles, they are in regulation, financials, tax treatment, whatever. But there is a major aspect I think founders should consider, which we would like to have your insights, Khaled, about, is the fact of cultural differences, consumer behavior. How founders in a small project in small market would think strategically from the beginning, from the early stage, to direct their project in the right way, so they can cover up a regional market or the African market that we know in advance that has different consumer behavior and different cultures. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll just take your question and tweak it a bit. So you're right. There are important differences from a cultural standpoint. I think this can be overcome with basically recruiting the right team on the ground. And so the question becomes, how do you build a team that comes from very different regions and have the different culture or come from different culture? I think the most difficult elements when you go for a multi-region team is culture. Is how you build this into one single culture that is strong, where people look into the same direction, where basically the culture and the ethos of the company can absorb any friction that can exist between. This is a much more complicated question. There's no single truth in what I'm going to say, but I think the role of the founder there, spending time in these different markets and bringing the people together, is quite important. The only way to build multi-country companies is to have a company that are recruiting in different markets and attracting the talents in those markets. I think there's no shortcut basically to that.
Last question.
Walid Bela from Endeavor. Thank you, Khaled, for all these insights. Earlier, you mentioned also about exits, and I think to your point, it's very important. I wanted to get your perspective on, specifically in Africa, let's say, how do you feel about How do you feel about the ability of scale-ups to scale in a big way their revenue, and that is supposed to then lead to big exits. So who do you see the big VCs or the big corporations that would be able to absorb these big exits in Africa specifically? Because I think it's a little bit different from the rest of the world. And are you anxious or not about about this topic as an investor in Africa?
First, I'm very anxious. The team will tell you this. It's the only quality probably that I have. Maybe not quality actually, but. So how to grow revenue? I mean, this is the $100 billion question that I wouldn't know how to answer. But yes, you have to grow revenue. If you want to create an interesting exit, you have to grow your revenues. I think you need to create growth. This is the rule of the game in VCs. Otherwise, you have to work into something different. Then what kind of exits? This is a very interesting question. So. There will be probably different kinds of exits. The most interesting ones will probably come from what we call other industry players. So it can be a technology company buying a local company in Africa. It can be a major competitor globally acquiring a company which, like Karim, has been acquired by Uber. These are probably the most important, and these also are emblematic exits. So basically, that will stay over time, and on which basically they will build more flows of investors coming, but also will build a new type of investors, which are actually the former founders that become investors. This is a very important step that we are starting in Africa with a few exits that have been happening in Nigeria and other markets. Then there's another way to exit for funds, which is basically taking a secondary on a round. And so a lot of, I don't know where Zach is in the room, but there's some funds that start very, very early at pre-seed and even before, and those can actually exit at the Series A, Series B. That's enough. You don't need to be too greedy, basically, to create liquidity for your investors. There's a last way to exit, which is basically using private equity funds. About a third of investment globally of PE today is into technology and innovation at late stage. And we're seeing this happening in Africa. There have been a few deals. We did one of the deals with the Maghreb Private Equity Fund, actually that was announced this week in Arabiat, which is a joint Egyptian company into the ad tech space. We invested with the PE fund into MFS and Move. So these are also a trend that can actually help some of the companies that will probably not be acquired by the very best in this world, but are still very interesting companies that can become profitable and that can be acquired there. All of this is happening right now, which is quite an interesting new trend.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so last question, really like a quick one and quick answer. Sorry.
Yannick, double for the partners. Hadi, thank you as always. Just a quick question. I want to take one data point from your presentation. So, fintech having the lion's share of VC investment, and try to apply that to the Tunisian context. First-time visitor, enjoying every minute of it. But how do you see the fintech revolution happening in Tunisia, knowing that it's been pretty cash-based?
We experienced this together.
Yeah.
No, that's an interesting question. Listen. Tunisia's fintech still has a very big potential, but I think we're waiting for the central bank and some of the regulators to put in place the right framework from a regulatory standpoint. It's been one of the toughest one, and I think Tunisia and some of the countries like Morocco needed such a framework after independence in the 60s to the 80s. Things need to change. Obviously, it needs to be more openness, and I think some of the interesting examples to follow here are Egypt and Kenya, that's been at the forefront, and Nigeria right now, quite an important one that's been at the forefront of trying to innovating from a regulatory standpoint. In fintech, currently in countries like Tunisia or Morocco, you need to try to either be big or to try to be non-regulated and use partners to basically take up the hurdle of the regulation through banks or anything like this. That's the only way to go. On the payment side, you're absolutely right. There's more to be done. There are some interesting startups that were here yesterday evening, for instance, that are trying to play around the regulation on the gateway side, on the mobile money side. So I think there are ways that you can operate. obviously, if the regulation doesn't help, it's a bit more challenging for investors and for entrepreneurs to succeed there.
Thank you, Khaled Ben Jilani. Bravo.
Thank you very much.